Welcome back to the Corral. Today we are going to talk about summer reading, vintage paperbacks, and there's a bonus involved in this episode in the middle here. We'll get to that fairly quickly because we're going to talk about some books that were made into films and a film that became a book. That's the first one. A film that became a book. It's called Last Train from Gun Hill. It was a film starring Kirk Douglas and Anthony Quinn. It came out in the summer of 1959, and it was made into a paperback novel by Gordon D. Sheriffs, who was a veteran of Western paperback action. He was a good writer. I have quite a few of his books over here, or everywhere you go. I have a lot of Westerns, and a lot of them are still in storage, but I've gone through everything. Anyways, Last Train from Gun Hill was by Gordon D. Sheriffs, based on the screenplay by James Poe and a story by Les Crutchfield. I have never read the Les Crutchfield story. I would like to track that down sometime. So it's a novelization of the screenplay. And so it was a film first. This is one of Kirk Douglas's great Westerns. He'd already made a slew of Westerns in his career in that 10-year period before this came out. I think just about every Western he made in the 1950s is pretty good. I like them. I mean, there are so many of them, you know. It's just amazing. This is a classic. I think Last Train from Gun Hill is one of the great Westerns of the 1950s. It's one of Kirk Douglas's great films. Anthony Quinn, Earl Holliman, and so many other people are in this movie. It's just fantastic. Carolyn Jones is in it. So the book. Okay, so the book is standard. You know, if you enjoy the film, you'll enjoy the book. The book is a very short version of the screenplay, and I think you'll enjoy it. If you're a Western collector and you're a Kirk Douglas fan, you kind of go for this. And I did go for it, and I have it, and I've kept it because I liked it. Last Train from Gun Hill, from film to book. The next one, we're getting into some bonus material here before we get to the final one. And you could already guess what these books are from the thumbnail that's out there. But we're going to talk about The Roots of Heaven by Romain Gary. He was a French writer, and this book was published in France in, 56, I think, and then it was released, translated by Jonathan Griffin, and released in the United States as a paperback in 58, The Roots of Heaven, because it was going to be a major motion picture, and so it was. It was a major motion picture that did not do well. The screenplay was by Romain Gary himself, the author, and a man named Patrick Lee Fermor. We're going to talk about him. Here's your bonus coming up. But before we get to that, I want to explain the book. So it's about an environmentalist who's played by Trevor Howard in the film. And the book is pretty good. I think it's a bit long and it's a bit windy, so to speak, but it gets its point across quite well. To help the elephant population and so forth. I think the book kind of meanders, but that's because I'm reading a translation. I think it's a good book, and I recommend the book just by itself, even if it hadn't been made into a film. The film, I put the poster up here. We have to talk about the film because Errol Flynn's in it. He gets top billing over Trevor Howard. Orson Welles has a bit in it, and Juliette Greco is the girl here who's, she's covered up. And Flynn's got his wicked eye at her. Errol Flynn gets a lot of attention in this film because of his performance. Didn't he play Robin Hood once? Just kidding. For those of you that know my background, that was a bad joke. Anyway, I think the film wasn't well received and flopped. Over the decades, the film has a better reputation now because it has that, I don't know, the way they filmed, the way John Huston filmed it, the way he filmed it, and the performances in it. It has an allure to people, In it, of course, you have an excellent cast, and each member of the cast has isolated great moments. So, book to film, The Roots of Heaven by Romain Gary. Now, we're going to talk about the screenplay. The screenplay was by the author Romain Gary with Patrick Leigh Fermor. Patrick Leigh Fermor is your bonus material today in relation to his career. As I have to find the books, what do I do with them? All right, so Patrick Leigh Fermor was born in 1915. He died in 2011. He was a part of the Greek resistance in Crete during World War II. And he is a man's man. He was a man's man. He's the full package on what a man should be and how a man conducts himself and what a man does. Look into his life. Google him. He was incredibly handsome. The photographs attest to that. He was a man filled with courage, intelligence, passion for life. A true, very staid, typical British man in some ways, but in other ways he was ahead of his time. He spoke multiple languages, and he wrote multiple books. Notable, of course, is his participation in the Greek resistance during World War II. What a man he was. What a courageous man. So, in the late 50s, just before, working on The Roots of Heaven, he begins publishing his own books. A Time of Silence, which is here, and I'll have a scan pop up, which is one of his shorter books. And this is Patrick Leigh Fermor recounting his travel adventures in Europe prior to the war. So he's a memoir. There's his memoir. He followed that with Manny, Travels in Southern Peloponnese, in the following year in 58. Here he is on the cover, scan coming up, just to give you an idea on what he looked like. You can Google photographs of him. They are all over the internet. This was a man's man. I keep saying that because it's true. How many people can say that? As far as his writing goes, this guy was a superb writer. He became known as a travel writer. After all of this amazing stuff that he did, he became known as a travel writer. Manny, Travels in Southern Peloponnese. This is one of his great books. And then I have a couple of them here. A Time of Gifts was 1977, much later. And I don't remember where this one was. This is material if you're interested in travel writing. How do you express those experiences in English, just to be blunt? Patrick Leigh Fermor. And finally, we have Between the Woods and the Water, which is when he was, and this takes place in 1934, another memoir where he went to Hungary and Budapest and so forth, and he's looking at the various castles. Look at I don't know if you can see the cover well here. A beautiful cover illustration on here. That damn light went off again. Did you see that? I gotta get that fixed. Anyways, Patrick Leigh Fermor is your bonus material here today. If you get a chance, pick up his travel books. These are fascinating. I almost knocked the camera over. That's why you see it doing that little wiggle there. Sorry about that. Anyways, I had to get that in because Patrick Leigh Fermor is one of my favorites when it comes to writing travel. I have a collection of travel books. I have written a travel memoir myself, and I have works that are always ongoing. None of that's been published. I just write it because I do it. But this guy is something else, okay? Now, when it comes to The Roots of Heaven, he was on the set. He actually appears in the film as an extra in a brief scene. I can spot him. I don't remember off the top of my head what scene he was in. But he worked on the film, so he was right there with the cast. I don't remember if it was in his letters. It might have been in his letters to one of his friends, where he's talking about Errol Flynn. And at this point in his life, so I've been told, Errol Flynn was having some difficulties, and obviously he's well past the age of the Seahawk and Robin Hood and all of those great, wonderful films that he starred in. And nobody really liked him, according to Patrick Leigh Fermor, but Patrick Leigh Fermor liked him. He thought he had a certain charm to him. He was just not at his best at that period. Fascinating man, fascinating film to watch when you start looking at some of the stories about it. But just watch the film by itself to see how you feel about it, and I think you'll be entertained. The book is pretty good too. It's not, not my all-time favorite book. Again, this is a translation. So the African nationalist who hated elephants because they had turned his country into a rich man's playground. It has an American officer in disgrace, a moral gun runner, a famous but cold-blooded magazine photographer, a young German girl who had lost her illusions of life after the rape in Berlin, and on and on. So there you go. You have some bonus material with this summertime reading recommendation. An odd book, perhaps even an odder movie. I think it's a good film. I think it's a good book. Check it out, but check out Patrick Lee for more and his wonderful travel books. Finally, to end this long-winded episode, we're going to talk about I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. I Am Legend was published in 1954. This is the 1971 paperback that came out to coincide with the movie starring Charlton Heston. I like the film. I remember seeing it when it came out. I am familiar with the Will Smith 2007 version of this book. The Charlton Heston film was obviously retitled from I Am Legend to The Omega Man. The book was called I Am Legend. The Omega Man was the film version with Heston. I like Charlton Heston. I am a Charlton Heston fan. Maybe I'll just do a film episode about some of his great movies from the 1950s. He did some stuff that's incredible. Really fun, entertaining stuff. I really liked him. Richard Matheson, okay? Richard Matheson I love. I have a stack of Richard Matheson here. I don't remember where they are now. They're either in this wild mess over here or they're behind me on the floor. I'm not sure which. I have stacks of books down here. Anyways, great book. Really great book. This is one of Matheson's best. He dedicates this book to none other than Henry Kuttner. With my grateful thanks for his help and encouragement on this book. Can you imagine? Richard Matheson got around. He had a fascinating life. I mean, I'm going to do a better episode about Richard Matheson because I have so much here. And I'm such a fan. So, I wanted to get those 3 books out there for you with some bonus books by none other than one of the great heroes of World War II and one of the great travel writers, raconteurs, and memoirist, a real man's man. So I hope you find that interesting. I'm really happy I got into bonus material because I hadn't gotten to him before, and I thought, well, I'll do The Roots of Heaven because he was involved in that production. Anyways, there's your beach material. Really off to the side stuff, not your popular library, your popular modern fiction beach reading material. I like to choose different things. And so I haven't I? I gave you a little bit of this and that, a Western, a science fiction classic, a book about Africa, and some travel books by a real man. Thank you for listening to this. I've been rambling again. Thank you for listening to this rambling episode. I do hope you're well. I do hope you are well and that you stay happy and that you read a lot of books. See you soon.